when we think that we're responsible for something, then it's just like that. It's just like putting a weight on your back and seeing how far you can carry it. Jesus said, "Hey, if you're weary, if you're heavy burdened, come to me and I will give you rest, because my yoke is easy and my burden is light." You're not anxious about things that are happening most of the time. You're anxious about things that could happen. So you're looking into the future, right? And you're having a belief, or you're clinging to, you're having faith in the thing happening that you don't want to happen instead of the thing that you do want to happen. Well, often what we're telling, especially young people, is that if you feel pressure, if it feels hard, if it feels uncomfortable, then there's something wrong. And I'm like, no. Most of the time, if you're feeling that way, it's just telling you that you're in the arena, you're in the battle. So often entrepreneurs will say, it's lonely and you find yourself on an island and it's hard to find people who can relate and all these things. Like, and you know what that looks like to the enemy? It looks like a wounded animal. We gotta find our pack, and we gotta stay in the pack, because it's actually when we're in the pack that we're all safer. It's when we're in the pack that we're more dangerous. It's when we're in the pack that we have the highest chance of getting to where we want to go. The last few weeks here at Move Right have been a little bit different. We started a weekly meetup, and that meetup includes several men at this point. Maybe someday there will be women in there, but right now it's a lot of men and business guys, family guys, faith guys, and we've all been getting together to really explore, like, what does it mean to move right and to identify potential in our lives? Maybe it's in our faith or family, business, investing money, whatever it might be. And what does it look like to identify the potential in those areas and then go and develop ourselves or develop our businesses or whatever, our families, to actually make that potential real? And so it's changed a little bit of what Jake and I have been doing the last few weeks, but it's been really awesome. And today, what Jake and I are going to do is we're going to just spend some time and kind of recap some of the themes, some of the cream that rose to the top in this last meeting that we had with 10 or 11 guys, because I thought it was really valuable, and maybe there's something in here that you can take with you as you go through your week. And so we got three core things that we're going to try and get to today. The first is this idea that, what happens when everyone leans on you, right? Maybe it's as a dad or a husband, or maybe it's as a mom, right? And you're carrying the load of the house or whatnot. What happens when everyone's leaning on you? Like, who do you lean on? Where do you go for support, for guidance, for encouragement, those kinds of things? The second is, what's the difference between anxiety and faith, right? Lots of people are feeling anxious constantly, constantly feeling the weight or the burden of doing something. And we got a little bit of a twist on what that might mean and what the opposite of that might be, and how you might process through, if you're feeling anxiety, how to turn that into a faith, a strong faith that propels you forward instead of keeping you in a shell or in a fight or flight mode. Number three is, what do you do when there's just tons of pressure, when you feel like everything that you're doing comes with a huge amount of pressure? Because sometimes that pressure, we might think, hey, is that pressure telling me I should be doing something different? Like I should pivot, I should make a move? Or is that pressure just proof that I'm in the arena? So those are the three things that we really spent a lot of time talking about in this last meetup. If you want to learn more about the meetup, or you ever want to join one, you can check it out. You can apply to join at MoveRight, MoveRight.me, MoveRight.me. Again, if you're ever interested, we'd love to talk to you about it and see if it's the right fit. So with that, Jake, you've been gone for a week or so. I'm glad to have you back. Let's dive in.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. I was at the past couple of weeks of meetups, and man, to anybody listening to this, there's some genuine fruit that's coming out of that. And for somebody like me, a young guy who's working through, starting business, moving, new marriage, and all of it, there's a lot of wisdom in the room, and a lot of genuine community, and it's just amazing. But definitely the themes that you discussed right there, the three things that you brought up, were definitely three things that I could self-identify with pretty well. So yeah, I guess let's just start with the first one, because this one is long before this topic came up in this conversation. I've been, looking to you for mentorship on this, because I think you do this very well and you have a genuinely good outlook on it, of like, when you have so many irons on the fire and you have so many people leaning on you, You have your children and your wife, and you have your business, and you have everything going on all at once. It feels like it seems like you're calm as a cucumber. So I'd love to kind of pick your thoughts on that, and kind of where you go when you're having that. Because for me, it's like, no, I don't have a 50 employee business, and no, I don't have kids yet, but I'm want to be prepared for when that time comes, so I'm not sitting there with my pants down when the when the tide goes out. So yeah, if you want to share kind of your thoughts there, what you have going on.
Yeah, love to. And I think this is one of those topics that many men, and like I said in the intro, many women feel the pressure, feel the weight of responsibility, as we like to call it. And I wish I could sit here and tell you that I was just born calm as a cucumber or whatever you called me, and that everything was easy and simple. But the reality is it's just not the case, right? I grew up. Sometimes you can take the things that happened to you in your past and you can use them as fuel to build a beautiful, great future. And I think that I did that in many ways as it related to exactly what we're going to talk about in this topic. But at the same time, if you're not aware, then the very thing that you were using to kind of fuel your growth, fuel your progress, fuel your success, can actually become the thing that you become a slave to. And I would say in many ways that this has probably been the most difficult topic for me in my life, because as a young kid, I was always, and I don't think my parents went out to make it this way. And maybe in their minds it wasn't this way, but in my mind, I always felt like a big responsibility for my siblings. I had multiple siblings live with me. Obviously, your wife lived in our house all through high school, and we think of her as our kid, and there's 19 years in between her and I, but there's a lot of things that happened as I was young, and where I felt responsibility. I felt like everyone was leaning on me. I felt like, man, you got to be you got to be a dad. You got to have it all together. You got to have it figured out. You got to be the one that people can lean on and rely on. And so in many ways, that propelled me to take things seriously and to get ahead and to work hard and to be organized and to figure out how to make it happen. And I think that in many ways, there were positive results from that. But I would say in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, that weight, especially as everything kept getting bigger, right? Like the business kept getting bigger, the dollars that we were working with kept getting bigger, the properties that we're dealing with get bigger, the family gets bigger. Everything's getting bigger, and so you start to feel more and more of this pressure, this weight. And again, I'd say a few years ago, I got introduced to, as anybody who's watched these videos has heard many times, I got introduced to Jamie Winship, and one of the things he said that really changed my life is he said, God doesn't give us responsibilities, and some people probably don't agree with that, but I'm not here to debate whether it's 100% right or not. I'm just here to explain the principle behind it that I think is true. He says, when we think that we're responsible for something, then it's just like that. It's just like putting a weight on your back and seeing how far you can carry it. And then inevitably in life, more and more and more weight will get stacked on your shoulders until at some point you're down on a knee and you can't get back up. And then if you don't figure it out like that, then you're down prostrate on your face, and the weight's pinching you, suffocating you. And I think that is so true, because what he says is God doesn't give you responsibility. He invites you into things, right? And so when we think that the onus is on us, that the responsibility is ours, then essentially what he says we're doing is we're essentially looking at ourselves as God. Like, hey, it's up to me. My family, if I'm not doing my job and I'm not getting ahead, and I'm not essentially being God, is going to suffer. And I think we got to be careful. One of the things I try and always do in these conversations is leave room for nuance, because it's so easy, it can become black or white, and that's not reality, right? So why I say that is because, listen, if I'm not actually going out and doing anything, then yeah, my family's going to suffer. But if I'm out there and I'm putting one foot forward and I'm working hard and I'm constantly trying to get better, then I ultimately have to let God have the responsibility, because it is God's responsibility. All He's done is He's invited me into stewarding this family He's given me. He's invited me into stewarding the resources He's given me. He's invited me into stewarding the business, or or whatever, the team members that I have. It's been an invitation. And so the minute that I take that invitation and I start looking at it as my responsibility and it's up to me, then all of a sudden I think in my brain that I have nobody to lean on. And everybody's leaning on me. And there's this constant pressure and this weight. And I think that's where, like Jesus said, hey, if you're weary, if you're heavy burdened, come to me and I will give you rest, because my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And so, so some practical things. One is every day as you start to feel the pressure or the weight or whatever it is that you want to call it, just to step back and remember, like, hey, the ultimate the ultimate outcome is not up to me, right? I have to take solace. I have to rest in the fact that God is in control. God is sovereign. And as long as I'm actually not being lazy and I'm walking and I'm doing the best that I can, then ultimately He's in control, and I have to trust that. So that's one thing that's obviously practical. But the second thing, which is what I've really been trying to do recently, is like, the minute that we tell ourselves we're isolated, we're isolated. And so don't call yourself isolated. Don't, like, I hear all the time, being an entrepreneur is like being on an island, or being successful is like being isolated. And it's like, yeah, that's because that's what the enemy wants us to say. When in reality, I think what the Lord wants us to do is be in community. And so I've been trying to be much more intentional about being in community. And that's part of why we started doing these Thursday things. Because I'm not sitting here trying to be the guru. I'm just trying to create an environment where guys who are on a similar journey, who, if we're not careful, will feel the exact burden and weight and leaning on that we're talking about, where those guys, and at some point maybe some ladies, have a place to come where they can realize we're not in this alone. We're not here. We don't have to carry the burden. This is not our burden to carry alone, right? God will carry it for us, and He wants us to carry it together. And so I talked for a long time there, but it really has been one of my biggest things that I've had to work through in my life. And I will say, like, maybe somebody can relate to this. I never felt like I was dying. I never felt like it was too much. There was always just this underlying lack of ultimate peace and ultimate freedom, because there's this part of you that's hanging on to. I can never relax because everything, it's in some way, shape, or form is up to me, and I gotta hold it together. And it's not a very, like, I think if we don't deal with that, it can lead to some really bad places down the road.
Right. No, that's really interesting. I think for me, especially being in a more of a management role at my current job, is like I can really identify with the idea of, if I don't do it, it doesn't get done. And I'm sure you can kind of see that part of it as well.
Mhm.
And that can creep into other personal areas of your life too. And I can speak to that too, where it really, like you said, it's just throwing another layer of bricks on. It's like, if I don't take the trash out, it's not going to get thrown out, whatever, right? And there's little things that just stack on over time and over time, and it's I think it's really interesting, the point that you pointed out of like the idea of, you know really being honest with how hard you're working. You know, uh, you can't be perfect. You can't be successful all the time. You're gonna fail, and it's easy, especially probably for men, and probably for a lot of women and mothers, and like you pointed out as well, of like feeling the weight of other people around you looking to you for that answer, and for a right answer, right? Not just any answer, but as long as you're in your head thinking like, man, I did my due diligence, I did my research, I worked hard at it, and like, as long as you can walk away with your hands clean and say that I did the best that I could in this situation and God's watching me, I think that is a very healthy way that I've been trying to look at it. I mean, of course, like you mentioned, it's it's always, there's always creeping, it's always stalking, and so that part of it's in the friction. So yeah, maybe that kind of goes into the next topic too, is this idea of anxiety versus faith.
Yeah, so we talked about this. This was a lot of fun, and I think is something again that we probably all wrestle with. Which, if you think about what we just talked about, I think you're right in that they're tied together. Because when you start to feel like everything's up to you, everybody's leaning on you, then what that usually will result in is anxiety. And at the end of the day, like, it's the belief in what you don't want to have happen. It's like you having a belief that the thing you don't want, so your imagination in the thing that you don't want coming real, right? So it's looking into the future, it's imagining the thing that you don't desire, and it's having faith that that thing that you imagine that you don't want is going to happen. Okay? And then there's this other side of the equation where you look into the future, you imagine something that you do desire, and you have faith that the thing you imagine that you do desire is what's going to happen, right? So in both instances, we're seeing potential, right? And people will start to see this idea of potential. We've talked about it a lot in the past, but I think it will become more center because really underneath all of this, what we're talking about is God created us to identify potential in ourselves, in our kids, in pieces of land, in businesses and ways to serve. He said, go identify potential and then go develop and deploy and make it real, right? Develop yourself for it, deploy yourself in it and make it real. And so in the instance of anxiety, we're looking out into the future because you're not anxious about things that are happening most of the time. You're anxious about things that could happen. So you're looking into the future, right? And you're having a belief or you're clinging to, you're having faith in the thing happening that you don't want to happen instead of the thing that you do want to happen. And so both of those have to do with potential. And so for me, I look and I go, when we're feeling the pressure, instead of saying, I'm getting anxious or I'm getting stressed out because the thing that I'm so afraid of happening, I'm convinced it's going to happen in a way. We're saying, no, I've got the same stuff on my shoulders. I'm carrying the same load, but I'm actually going to look into the future and say, oh, this is great because I'm just on the journey for where I want to go. Right. And this is not like some woo woo stuff. This I'm not just trying to say you speak it into existence in the way that some people would say it, but what I am here to say is, as a man thinketh, he is, right. The more you think about the negative thing that you don't want to happen happening, the more likely it is to happen because, like Tony Robbins says, where your focus goes, your energy flows. So if you're constantly focused on what you don't want to have happen, all of a sudden your energy starts to get diverted from getting to where you want to go to like trying to protect yourself from the thing that you don't want to have happen. And so, do you want to play defense or do you want to play offense? And I think that a huge part of it in what we talked about this last week is not that what you're afraid of happening or maybe could happen isn't real. Like it's real, there's a possibility. But being afraid of it and walking and staying in the fear isn't going to help you avoid the thing you're afraid of. And so instead, spending our time, our effort, our mental capacity, even the way we speak to ourselves, to our families, to other people around us, like speaking life into things. This is where I'm going. This is why I'm excited to get there. I'm not there yet, but man, look how far I've come.
Right. No, I think that's really awesome. One thing I've also noticed, and through a through line for a lot of our conversations, is we've talked about it a lot in the past of this idea that God created us in His image, and He's a creator, so we're creative, right? He inherently made us imagine things and then bring them to life. That is unique to human beings, and I think it's also in this sense, it's like one of those things that the devil can attack really easily because the more creative the person you are, you basically can see the more creative of a, a situation going bad you can have. It's like I spent a lot of time doing statistics going through high school and college, and I got a math minor in my engineering degree, so I spent a lot of time in statistics, and statistics are really interesting, right? And when you think about statistics, you think about some of the most crazy stories that ever happened. It's like 0.001% chance. But the more creative we are, the more loud that noise is. It's like for us, we're moving to Florida, and it's like my wife and I are talking. We're like, well, what if we get a flat tire? Well, what if somebody breaks into our shipping container? What if like somebody, the more creative we are, the louder it gets, the louder it's so easy for it to creep in. And I think that's like exactly what you said. It's your imagination tied with your fear versus imagination tied with your hope. So we've been actively saying, like, in our move to Florida, we're just like, we're stoked to get there. We're talking about what we're going to do when we get there. And it's like that there's there's a certain level that you're I don't know what the proper word would be, but almost responsible to, I would say, to do your due diligence, right? You don't want to, you want to probably have a spare tire, right? You probably want to have a lock on your shipping container. But there's certain things that you just can't avoid doing, you know? Um, so I think that's really interesting. I guess one question that I would have for you though is like, what do you think? Maybe this isn't even an answerable question, but that line, for me, it's like a statistical analysis. If it's like 1% chance, I might not worry about it. What do you think in that sense of like, okay, how do you identify in a moment where it's like, I need to do my due diligence so I feel the hope instead of the fear?
Yeah, well, as you know, one of my themes in life is see it, believe it, go for it, right? So step one is seeing something. Step two is belief. But belief isn't just like, hey, I'm going to think myself into belief. Belief is, it's much more complex than that. It's the process that we go through. It's the evidence that we develop. Like if you're going to go to trial, right? You don't just go into a trial as a trial attorney saying, "I'm just going to believe that we're going to get the outcome, the verdict that we desire." No, we go in and we prepare and we research and we analyze and we question and we interview and we put pieces together and we build a case that we find so strong, so compelling that that belief is what helps us go forward in trial. And I think life is very similar, right? So like if we're going to make an investment decision, we invested in a $19 million property and we have to raise over $7 million. Okay? Now, do I know 100% that this thing's going to go how I anticipate it going? Well, no, I don't. I never will. That's why it's risky, right? But did I do the due diligence? Did I go through that trial attorney kind of process to really get to the point where I go, hey, I'm very confident that barring some black swan thing or something completely out of my control, we can execute on what I've seen, what I saw, the first step, because I've prepared myself and I've developed myself. That's why I say develop potential. You don't just see it and it makes it real. You see it, you develop yourself, you develop the potential, and then it's real. And so that's there. So to answer your question, yeah, obviously it depends on the situation. But the reality is like, would I bungee jump if there was a 40% chance that the cord was going to break? No, I wouldn't. Right? Would I invest $7 million into something if there was a 40% chance I was going to lose my money? No. Right? And but would I invest but would I invest $7 million into something if there was a 5% chance or a 1% chance, but I knew that I had done everything I could to mitigate that risk? Yeah, that's what we do every day. And so I wrote a note as you were talking. It's like this. When you're afraid, the creative part of your brain shuts off. Okay? So when you're afraid, it's very hard to create. Okay. So if you're thinking about traveling across the country and in your brain's going to, well, they might break in, we might get a flat tire, we might this, that's your brain is expending resources, a limited amount of resources on these things this thing that you're imagining that you don't desire. Now, think about this. Your brain could use the same amount of capacity to say, what if this is going to be the best trip of our lives? What if this trip is going to change everything in our relationship? It's going to make it stronger. It's going to make it better. It's like you don't even spend any time thinking of those things. So here's what I wrote down. Fear can't create or appreciate. Because here's the other thing. When you're driving along the road and you're constantly worrying about your tire going flat or is your stuff safe, you can't appreciate all the sights that you're seeing, the time you have together, the conversations you've had. So it's like fear literally shuts off our brain from experiencing the very things and creating the very things, solving the very problems God wants to solve that He created us for. And so that's where I think we have to is maybe not the right word. I would encourage us all, myself included, to just spend more of our time being cognizant of if we find ourselves feeling anxious, it's because we are clinging to a desire in the future we don't want. We're putting our faith in something we don't want to have happen instead of putting our faith in something we hope to have happen.
Right. No, that's good. And I think also great segue into our next topic because I think this is Also, a lot of the times when I think about the fear that you were just talking about, and that feeling of losing creativity in those moments, the word that I would almost associate that would be pressure. And that goes into our next one, is like, okay, in these things that we're doing every day, it's so interesting because it's really easy to feel the pressure. I'm sure you've felt it. I'm sure you can relate to that as well. It's like the pressure is there. So it's like, what kind of feedback are you getting from that pressure? Because a lot of the times people will say, you know the pressure is a sign that you should probably try something new. But I think, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit better. It's like the pressure is almost a counterintuitive single signal that you're on the right path. So, and maybe you can speak to this in your personal life, or maybe it's a better example in your business life, because I'm sure everybody can relate to the idea of pressure. But yeah, do you have an example of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the things that we talk about, the natural human tendency is to feel it as pressure, right? I think when you feel pressure, it's this idea of something pressing on you. And so many things in life, I think, give us the natural human emotion of feeling pressed on, pressure. We feel pressed on when we're in a hurry. We feel pressed on when money's tight. We feel pressed on when we have to make a big decision that we're not necessarily totally confident in. And so here's what came up in the group is you have these 11 guys talking about just daily life and what they're wrestling through and what they're battling against. And you go, yeah, and that will leave you feeling like there's pressure. And so I think this is the thing. And again, there's nuance. I don't want to get rid of nuance because nuance is what life is about in many ways. And so it's like I'm not here to say that there's not a part of us that should and can learn to feel less pressure. But I don't think it's realistic to say that you're going to get to a place of nirvana where you never feel pressure, because I think pressure is uncomfortability, right? And the more comfortable you can get dealing with the feelings of uncomfortability, probably the more successful you'll be in all the things in your life that you desire to be successful at. And so, what I said to the guys in the group is, I said, listen, there's a difference between the pressure that you feel that's an indicator telling you should probably just think about going in a different direction, versus the pressure that's telling you you're in the arena. Because so often, what we're telling, especially young people, is that if you feel pressure, if it feels hard, if it feels uncomfortable, then there's something wrong. And I'm like, no, most of the time, if you're feeling that way, it's just telling you that you're in the arena, you're in the battle. And then you have to learn how to live with and navigate that feeling of pressure. And yes, the more you get used to it, the less pressurizing it will feel. But the idea of just running from the pressure is usually going to lead you in the wrong direction. Because I think, think about reading your Bible when David is running from Saul and he's getting chased all around, his area that he was running around. Like, I got to believe, I don't know as a fact, it doesn't say it in my Bible, but I got to believe he felt there was some pressure, right? I think that all, like, the disciples in the New Testament, when they're going from town to town and they're getting beaten and they're getting, pressed, pushed out, there's probably gotta feel some pressure, some weight, some pressing on in them. And yet the answer wouldn't have been to go do something else. The answer wouldn't have been to go, like, find your passion or find your purpose. And I'm not saying there's not a place for that, but I just think that, yeah, oftentimes pressure is just telling you, hey, you're in the game. Don't stop playing the game. Keep playing the game.
Right. No, that's really good. I remember this was probably almost a year ago now. We had a conversation at one point talking about friction, and that's kind of along the same vein of this idea of pressure, is feeling the weight of something, feeling then friction, right? And one thing that you brought up at that point in time was almost like friction is an invitation to find a solution, or is a
Hmm.
invitation to solve the problem. One of the topics that one of the gentlemen in our group came up with was basically, feeling the friction in his business, feeling the pressure in his business. And, the question that I would ask you is like, so you mentioned a great point of, kind of how you go about that. Is there a certain position, or knowing that when you're feeling pressure, you're in the game, right? Um, is there a position that once you're in that feeling, that's now an invitation to solve for that pressure? Is that pressure a signal to maybe fix that part of your business, or is it just a part of being in the business or in the game in itself, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends, right? Think about it this way: the minute you stop feeling pressure, you're probably dead. Like your heart has pressure, it's a pump, right? And so this idea is like gravity is pressure, right? So if you stop feeling pressure, you're dead. Um, now discerning between, is this pressure telling me, is it an indicator, is it a warning light, is it trying to tell me that it's time to move into something else, or is it something telling me that there's a problem that I can solve here, right? Because you're right, I think I even made a video at one point about this idea that friction, if we see it the right way, is it can be our superpower. Because everywhere there's friction, it means there's something that we don't like that we're rubbing against, and then there's an opportunity to solve a problem. And if you're suffering from that problem, there's probably lots of other people who don't like that friction either. So I will say, and this is where I think that we got to be really careful, because so often on the internet it turns into, I'm just going to give this blanket advice and it's going to apply to everyone. And I don't think that's the right answer. I think the right answer is, like, that's why you need to have your own relationship with the Lord. And that's why you have to be in tune with what the Lord is telling you. That's why you need to read your Bible, because your Bible will speak to you. The Lord will speak to you through your Bible and the very things that you're going through. Because, like, listen, I don't have the answer. I don't know if the answer for some person watching this or listening to this on the internet who's living with a ton of friction, I don't know if the answer for them is, hey, you're in the wrong thing, it's time to move on. Or it's, hey, this is an opportunity for you to grow, to overcome, to solve a problem. And this is going to make you stronger. It's going to make you better on the other side. But if that person's in community with people who are trying to develop their own potential in their own life, who are following the Lord, who are in prayer, who are in their word, like, that's who can help you the best. And that's really what we're trying to do in our meetups is like, hey, I don't have all the answers. But we as a community, I think we can come together. I think we can listen for what the Lord would want us to know, for what the Lord would want us to do. And I think we can encourage each other to say, hey, this is what I think. This is the right direction. That's why we call it move right. This is what I think the right direction is. Let's go. Let's develop this thing. And so I don't know if that's at all a satisfactory answer, but that's just how I think about it.
No, I think it's so good. I think you touched on the kind of final point that I'd like to add too, is like these meetups that we're having each week. It's so funny. The through line through all of these is, the feeling of feeling alone, and like a lot of people are leaning on feeling of anxious and anxiety, and feeling the pressure from your business or your all of these things. I can personally even say for myself, and I'm sure if other people were here from that group, they'd say the same thing, is like this idea of community is really really helping through that. And you brought up an excellent point, and I think what I'd add on is I do believe, like, you got to be in the word, you got to be praying, you got to be listening to the spirit. We're not here to say do this and you'll get this result, because there's, like we've talked about this whole time, is like there's no guarantee, right? But I do genuinely believe that oftentimes God can speak through people and speak through ways that maybe you're not listening. And that's just the biggest help I've gotten from this group. The biggest eye-opening experiences have been this, just like words that have come out of other people's mouth, not anything that I've read, not anything that I've made. It's just been clarity from other people. So yeah, I mean, I'm so appreciative of that group, so appreciative of the conversations we're having now. So yeah, thanks, Zach.
Yeah, and I'll say one last thing, and then we can wrap. If you go back to the book, I think it's in Exodus, maybe around the 17th chapter. There's this time where they're like out of Egypt, and they're wandering around in the wilderness, and God just says, hey, make sure you don't fall to the back of the pack, right? Think about it, there's like millions of people traversing through the wilderness, and it's just like in the wild with animals, right? Who gets picked off by the predator? It's the people, or in this case, the animals, right? That are wounded often, or underdeveloped, and they're in the back of the pack. They end up isolated, and when we're isolated is when we're in the most danger. And so this is what I think when I said earlier about, so often entrepreneurs will say, and I've even said it years ago, that it's lonely, and you find yourself on an island, and it's hard to find people who can relate, and all these things, like, and you know what that looks like? to the enemy. It looks like a wounded animal, right? Yeah, who's fallen. Maybe in this case, in their mind, they're at the front of the pack, but in his mind, they're at the back of the pack. They're not in a community. And so, to me, what we're really trying to do in these meetups, and hopefully outside of these meetups in a broader context, is it's like, listen, we got to find our pack, and we got to stay in the pack, because it's actually when we're in the pack that we're all safer. It's when we're in the pack that we're more dangerous. It's when we're in the pack that we have the highest chance of getting to where we want to go. And so for me, that's been a huge part of what we're doing and why we're doing it, is this idea that, like, listen, I want to identify potential. I want to develop the potential. I want to move in the right direction. But the only way that we're going to do that rightly is to do it together. And so with that, if you would have any interest watching or listening to this, in joining our meetups, again, you can check those out, moveright.me. There's a button on there, a link on there where you can apply. Right now, we're about as full as we want to get, but if we get more people who want to come in, definitely open to adding additional groups or exploring other options. But it is really awesome. It's been great, and I'm excited for where it's gone. If you got anything out of this, we'd love to hear about it in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button. If you could smash it, that'd be great. And share it with a friend, right? Because we're talking about things that resonate in the groups that we're working with. And if they resonate with that many guys, probably resonate with some of you and your friends. And so we appreciate you being here. Again, if you want to join, check out moveright.me, and we'll see you next time.